Kevin.
John, how you
Hey,
doing?
what's up, man?
It's going well. It's going well. Did you have a Merry Christmas?
I did. I did. I mean, not too crazy, but went to the Knicks game against the Celtics. Then went
Yeah,
to a expensive ass steakhouse afterwards.
that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
That's what a man does right there, Kevin. See, enough with this family shit. Family shit's overrated. It's all about going with your boys to a basketball game and then eating a manly steak.
Yeah, I could buy that. Yeah, mine was just drums, drums, drums all day, man.
The drums?
Drums. I play. I don't think I mentioned that, but I've been playing for about a year now,
Nice.
and I was recently gifted with a pair of Vic Firth soundproofs and a whole new set of sticks
Oh
to
shit.
go, to go fucking wild. And yeah,
And wild you went.
that's right.
Hell yeah. I'd expect nothing less from you.
I'm glad. So let's talk.
All right, we are talking. We are. This is this. It's funny. Like this wasn't even supposed to happen, and then randomly we just made it happen. Like I love when things get together. Like sometimes the interview kind of sucks. I know you. You know, you work with us or you work for us. I'm not too sure what the fuck we call it, but
Oh,
you're
that's
you're you're part of the BTB crew. So you know, it's just talking to like one of my friends. You know,
yeah,
it's just like those interviews that you're like so amped up. You're like, oh my God, we got this guest. This is going to be so much fun. So awesome. And then you get to it and you're like, oh, this sucks. You're like 5 minutes and you're like, all right, can we stop recording now?
ooh, yeah. You know, I still haven't actually hit that yet. It's usually before the actual interview itself. I'm just way too nervous to make a judgment call.
Hmm.
And then, but it also helps because usually whoever else is with me just is equally nervous.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, we kind of find a flow from there, and it's good. It's good. I like that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, podcasting is still a new medium, even though it's been around for a number of years already. But like now, it's like the peak of it, and even like with interviews and stuff like that, you know, it's just sitting down with one other person and knowing that whatever you say is going to be heard by a lot of people. I think that's what freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah, no, no, no. Like that's actually the most nerve-wracking aspect of it, I think, because people can take a lot away from just say 30 seconds of somebody speaking. They take away their mannerisms, they take away their perception of that person's intelligence, and those can either make or break the podcast entirely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can be saying some real truth. You can be saying so you can probably recite all of Socrates's works completely, but people might think you're an asshole, and that completely negate everything that you've been working towards for that entire cast.
Yeah, or you know, people will take out like a certain little detail, like a little thing you said, but nothing else without it. Like we were talking with, I think it was Derek from the band My Ticket Home, and we were talking to him about, I guess, like people like, you know, taking a little bit of what you said and then running with it. You know, those little headline grabbers type of scenarios. So I
Yeah.
basically went to him. I was like, okay, here, we could do this right now. Just say, you know, I support Hillary or I support Donald. And that's it. You don't have to say another thing. And people just grab that and make up whatever story there is about it. So,
Yeah, yeah, and that's how friendships get ruined, actually.
yeah, especially if you're friends on Facebook.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm happy to say that I managed to make it through the entire election cycle without unfriending anyone.
Hey, you got 4 more years, motherfucker.
4 more years, and let's hope that that doesn't actually have to change because that's just, mm, that would just be a shame.
A shame what? That he gets another four, or
I mean, yeah, I personally can't say anything, because I'm not super. I will be the first to admit it that I'm not really learned on politics. I'm nervous. I'm definitely really nervous, but I just want to sit back and watch before I say anything else.
I hear you. I mean, that's a great way to look at things, just because people already made up their minds, and he's not even sworn in as president yet.
Right. They think he's either going to be, as a large part of the more, 4chan-y side of Facebook puts it,
Yeah.
God Emperor Trump. They think he's going to be the be-all, end-all of the presidents. They think he's, going to be a fantastic, world-changing America. Let's, bring it back to its, golden throne. And then on the other side, you have a lot of people who think that he's just going to end everything.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, he's just going to be a figurehead, and a lot of people don't fucking realize this. Like, he could come up with some crazy rule, be like, okay, I want to enslave all the Jews, and Congress would be like, no, that's not happening. But, like,
Exactly.
people think that he has the right to push that through. It's like, no, that's not how the government works.
I'm actually glad you said that because shortly after the election, there was a 100-day plan released by NPR, and it actually talked about how he had proposed several ideas, such as I'm sure you might have heard his election promise of term limits
Yeah,
for
for Congress and Senate, I believe.
and that was just immediately shot down by McConnell, who said, "We have term limits. They're called election cycles." So, yeah, like there's not like we don't have to lose our no one has to lose their shit just yet because we have the government still functions. The world is not about to end, and we are not about to start some massive political dynasty of, you know, whatever because we're running on 200 years of legal of precedent to prove that we are going to be okay no matter what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't even the craziest thing we've done. We've put an actor, one of the top actors of his generation, in as president, and things didn't go that bad, I don't think. I mean, I really wasn't around during Reagan, but, from what I heard, it was obviously 50-50 depending on who you ask, but the world's still the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that honestly, that everybody on either side of this issue is very much blowing this out of proportion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Which actually, I'm glad we talked about this because that's what makes Architects All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us one of the top 5 albums of at least in the metalcore metal spectrum on this list.
There we go. That's how you turn this shit around.
Because All Our Gods is actually very much the most politically active, socially woke, and I'm putting heavy quotations on the word woke here.
Are we not supposed to use that word anymore, according to MTV?
Okay, yeah. So it's a very politically aware record, and I'm gonna preface that with saying that art, when it's released, is usually a reflection of the times that we have right now, and that's what Architects capture here. We have this almost Rise Against-ish vibe, right? Universal discontent. You have these themes of war. You have these themes of corruption and indignity and oppression. Everything that you, me, a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, any political party can say that they've experienced that somehow. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Combining that with the volatility of the record itself, you have songs like Nihilist, Death Wish, right? You have songs like Gone with the Wind, and you have Gravity, all of which are all just, they get in your face, John, and they do not let up. And they don't give you any sort of breathing room on the record to do so. You can't just sit there and be like, okay, deep breath, okay, next track. No, it's very much just, it hits you right in the fucking face, and it just keeps on going.
So you have no time to recover from this, is what you're saying.
That's right, and I feel very bad for whoever gets caught in the mosh pit at one of their shows when they put it on live. Honestly, that's what I loved about this record, is that it just so starkly furious, and that's the one, and that emotion is painted all over every single track. Combine that with, again, how precise the instruments are, how the guitar work is just it undulates throughout the entire work that the drums lay down, which aren't exactly what you'd call unorthodox, right? It's very
Hmm.
much you can follow along with it. It's there's a definite groove that you can pick out with a few complex fills here and there, right?
Yeah.
But it's still flavorful and it's still interesting. It's not like it's the same exact like dun 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 dun, the same rhythm put
Hmm.
over it. And let's just talk about the lead vocalist, Sam Carter's, and his voice. He's got such a unique fry scream. He's got such a unique pain that he expresses. And I think that it's all the more better that he picks politics as the issue that the band discusses on this record. Vocal pointing to specific songs such as "A Match Made in Heaven," where they he screams about how you chew up peace, you spit it out as war. You know, was it all worth it to watch their kingdom grow? All the anchors in their ocean never sunk this low. Where you can just hear how he's pissed off. Say like that's just it. He's pissed off. He just wants you to just feel again how pissed off he absolutely is. I don't really think I'm not putting this very eloquently. I realize that, but
No, it's all right. I think we're all following along to this.
yeah, but yeah, it's almost if you imagine it as a painting, it's just this. Imagine just a bucket of blood thrown over a white canvas. It's stark and it's violent and that's the image his voice gives me whenever I hear him.
Okay, I gotcha.
And if you'll actually believe it, this album was actually my introduction to the band.
Really? Wow.
Like, that was the case, and that was also the case with Norma Jean.
Yeah, before we get on to that, I just have a couple of questions about this album. I have yet to hear this album. Apparently, it did really well with the critics, and on the charts, it did very well as well. And I'm on the Wikipedia page, I'm reading it says all tracks written by Tom Searle, who recently passed away. Now, I wonder who's going to pick up the slack here in writing these new songs coming up, and I wonder if I guess most of the album he says like very political, very in your face. If that's more of Tom's style, and what will we see from Sam and the rest of the boys coming up?
So what I'm hearing from the question is, Tom has passed away,
Yes.
and that and that he was their principal songwriter, and now you're asking, do you think that and you're asking if the political clout that surrounds his album was mostly him?
Like, do you think this is just basically Tom's swan song instead of like an Architect's album?
I honestly couldn't speak to the rest of Architect's discography. Again, not having been, having never actually listened to them
Mm-hmm.
before this album. But what I can say is that I feel as if it falls to Sam and his drummer, the other Searle's brother,
Yep, Dan.
Dan. It falls to both of them, I think, to pick up the songwriting slack. Primarily, as it stands, Sam has already hit the marks with his lyrics, and again, the drums I believe are the foundation of most music. Of course, in some cases they function as backbeats, as extensions of other instruments, but
Mm-hmm.
here I believe that the drums throughout this album were what primarily drove the rest of the songwriting. And I feel that the lyrics are also were very much matched to every breakdown, every groove, every line. So, therefore, it follows that in future albums, should Architects soldier on, which I hope they do. They're a fantastic band.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yes, I absolutely. That means that it is on Sam and Dan to foster that collaboration in songwriting as the principal writers.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah. Looking back on things, the first release after someone in the band passes away is very hit or miss. Going back a couple of years when with Hawthorne Heights, for example,
Uh,
they just came off of If Only You Were Lonely, one of their top albums, and then they went into, I believe, Fragile Future, which was a complete and utter bust. Then they decided to not do any screams since the person that passed away was doing all the screaming. The guitar player, shit, I forgot his name offhand.
mm,
Ah, crap. I'm sorry, it'll probably come to me later. But then you have a band like Bayside, who lost their drummer, John Beats Hollerhan, after their very successful self-titled album, Bayside. The one that followed it was The Walking Wounded, and it seemed like it would propel them into the band that they are today. So it's basically on both sides. You having a glorious review of this Architects record, I believe that they are going to find some sort of collaboration within themselves and put something out in memory of Tom. And hopefully it has the same passion. Hopefully, it's it helps them not only find peace, but also helps them convey to the audience saying that, look, you know what, things happened. We're sad about the events that, transpired, but we're here to stay, and here's our offering. So I guess we'll have to wait another 2 years for this. But
yeah, and I honestly I can't wait. They've already proven themselves to me, and yeah, honestly, uh, this was just a crazy record, and yeah, after hearing this, it was only shortly thereafter that I heard of Tom's passing. So that was definitely one of the. It saddened me. It was sort of when I found out about Chi Chang's passing in Deftones. Do you
yeah,
remember?
of course.
Yeah, and again, similar to that, they put out, and similarly to that, Deftones soon after put out a fresh album, and like all other Deftones records, it was absolutely brilliant, proving that they can still find it within themselves to carry on.
Yeah. Although I would still like to. They never really released Eros, right? The album that would have been with Chi Chang.
I think so. I think that's correct.
Yeah. So I don't think they ever put out any of those tracks. I think they just shelved it for good. So would be interesting to hear that final offering, but I understand where the band's going with in that scenario. So. But anyways, that was one hell of a review for the Architects record. That's All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us. You could get it in stores now, of course. So the next one you briefly mentioned, let's go into Norma Jean. Now, Norma Jean has been a band for quite a while, since I think the late 90s. I want to say 99, 2000 was Bless the Martyr came out. I could be 100% wrong on that, but I believe that's when it was. And they had a original vocalist, which was Josh Scobin.
Josh Skogan. Josh Skogan.
Scogan, who now was with the Chariot and is now with 68, and then I believe it was it Oh God the Aftermath that Corey came in.
I think yes, sir. I believe it was Oh God the Aftermath that Corey Brandon Putman assumed vocals.
Yeah, and a lot of people to this day still be like, yeah, Josh is the better vocalist of Corey. Look, there's really no real I guess comparison. I think it's two different bands going from the Bless the Child, Norma Jean to Polar Similarity, their latest record.
Most definitely. And there's a couple and actually I wanted to address that briefly. The first is, remember, like I had stated before, my emphasis on the drums of the band, lending itself to the band
Mm-hmm.
structure. Daniel Davison, uh, originally from Ludacris and Bless the Martyr, those albums, He's, of course, no longer in the band, replaced by a different drummer. His name is on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't get it. Anyway, point is, they have two very different styles, and when on Polar Similar, oh my god. This was also my first introduction to Norma Jean. I was completely and utterly blown away. It started off with the planet, and it just starts off with this gallop, this quiet gallop, pronounced by snares, drums, and the occasional, there's the occasional brush with a hi-hat, and then it just segues into this breakdown. And let me tell you something about it, John. I heard it, I was sold.
Really? From the first 30 seconds?
From the first 30 seconds, because it also gets up in my face, but in such a way that it's more pronounced, and there's more resolution, there's more distinction between each beat, the riffs. It's very subtle, but the instrumentation is always changing, and it's just and everything is so complex, and that's all on the first song. And and as soon as that's over, we segue into the second track and their lead single, "Everyone Talking Over Everyone Else." It's here that they start experimenting with lyrics, and they start going in, and they create a theme of dealing with abusive relationships. Everyone talking over everyone else is actually a metaphor on sexual harassment and those affected by it, and it's tragic. But at the same time, the instruments are tight, and you hear and how many records have you heard with a bass actually visible in the mix? How many metal records have you heard recently with that bass?
Metal? No, not that many.
Well, this is one of them. You can hear every instrument, and you can hear these fantastically driving drum solos in the background. You hear just these, shifted rhythms where it feels like it's going at this one pace, and then all of a sudden it takes a step, and all of a sudden it's very much in the vein of Billy Reimer's drumming off of the Dillinger Escape Plan.
All right, wow.
Yes.
That's high praise.
No. I listened to both. I'm a huge fan of the Dillinger Escape Plan, and after hearing this record, it felt like I was listening to those. It felt like I was just listening to those drums being repeated. How this very subtle tempo shifts, but still discernible. Still very much you can hear it, and it's. I'm sorry. Give me a minute.
Take your time.
It is a stark change from what I encountered on, say, All Our Gods, because I felt like those were two very specific types of, I want to say heaviness, I want to say instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
While Architects was very much about speed, Norma Jean is very much about hitting you in the face.
All right, I got you there.
Yeah, it's very much based on, say, it's very much appropriately placed breakdowns, and more metally than, say, more metally than its previous works, which are more prided on its metalcore breakdown, drums.
The
riff.
same pattern, yeah.
Right. Remember Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste?
Of course.
You won't be hearing anything like that on this album.
Really?
Really. You have... I feel Every Time I Die on this record. I feel Deftones on this record. Right? And I hear Tool, right? there's so many different bands that you feel the different influences that they're pulling in. The lyrics the lyrics are again very much drenched in meaning about dysfunctional relationships and how that affects the audience, who you can't tell is either is either Corey. You can't tell if it's the obvious, whoever he's dissatisfied with. You don't even know if it's just some second person narrative. It's the lyrics form this complicated narrative that unfolds itself, and I like that so much because I'm tired of hearing the same. Oh, I'm going to destroy you. Kind of very. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, no, yeah, exactly. Like you're just bored of the same.
Lyrical themes.
Yeah, basically, like going to like a band like Attila, you fucking bitch, I'll fucking kill you, shit like that. But like in more, polished and more cleaner sense that most bands do in this genre.
Right. This is no, yeah, like it's sort of like in rap the tired themes of constantly of coming up and hustling.
Yep.
This is, I feel, a perfect way of addressing poor relationships and emotional trauma.
Hmm.
His vocal performance is also very dynamic, very nuanced. In some cases, on say 1,000,000 Watts, one of my favorite tracks, he is absolutely screaming his lungs out, and it shifts into this growl, almost like this pained singing that you might hear on heavy metal records, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the drums being how they are. So it varies from song to song. Sometimes it'll be absolutely up tempo, in your face grindcore influenced, smashing, and then it turns into this much more polished, almost punky, uh, almost punky run before finally transitioning out to seemingly tribal, very tom based grooves.
All right, so there's
And
a lot of elements in this, is what you're saying.
that's right. There's a lot of different elements. There's so many different tempos, and there's so many ideas being thrown into it that it's very difficult for someone to do that and not get caught up in that, not get caught up. Do you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was a similar fault with, say, with the band Let Live's record, "If I'm the Devil."
Mm-hmm.
They had so much going on that it was very easy to get caught up in that and get kind of and almost stifle the good parts of that album.
I hear you. I honestly, I respect the band. I never really got into them. Like their live show is one of the best I've ever seen, but their actual music, it seems like they try to do a lot in a short amount of time, and they really don't go by any rules, which I do appreciate. But there's really no set like standard to any Let Live song. Like they're all over the all over the place.
Right. So that goes back to what I was trying to say with it's very easy to try a lot of stuff and get caught and not get caught up in it. Norma Jean pulls that off flawlessly here. You have them pulling out elements of southern rock. You have them pulling out, grind. You have them essentially exploring most of the extreme metal genre over this album. And the way that they pull it off is such a way that it's a Norma Jean record, and it's a damn good one at that.
There we go. Now, if you were to rank it with all of Corey's albums, where would you place it?
I still need to listen to Wrongdoers.
Okay.
I'm very much behind, but as for right now, I am incredibly satisfied with how this album has presented itself while throwing in different songs, changing up things without feeling like they're filler tracks.
Mm-hmm.
There's no bullshit, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
There's weird shit like like a little synth, like this almost carnival synth with a female voice counting back, and that's just over 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, titled "To the People." And then you have three, the planet, not the planet, sorry. It's something else, but it's this,
The Nebula.
the Nebula, and it's a very almost chilled out, almost bluegrassy vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just leaps right back into the swing of things without even missing a beat.
Now, is this album a concept album, or is it just a whole bunch of tracks with different like themes to it?
I feel like this is a concept album.
Okay.
I feel like this is a concept album because, firstly, the way that the tracks are titled, from one, two, three, four,
Mm-hmm.
those being seemingly the driving story to whatever's going on here. I honestly couldn't tell you right now, based on listening to it, my takeaway of what that concept might be. But
Gotcha.
I feel that there is a definite focus to their songwriting, and I feel like this is like there is a cohesive plot to be found within the music.
Okay. Sounds good. I would definitely have to check this out. I think the last actual Norma Jean album I've listened to, I think, was The Anti Mother. And that album was fucking amazing. I mean, Redeemer is still number one for me, but The Anti Mother, a lot of people did not like, but I was one of the biggest fans of that album. Just the whole way it was like this album seems like it's in your face. There's different types of elements, but everything pulls you all together. You're not left, wandering off. You're still on that same path that Norma Jean wants you to be on. So
Yeah, yeah, like and it's just the right mix of absolutely crushing metal without being too inaccessible. So you can, if you're a standard run, like if you're a standard run of the mill metalcore fan,
yeah,
this is it for you. If you're a more heavier Veil of Maya fan, this is for you. If you're a Dillinger Escape Plan, kind of guy, this is your record.
okay. So
This
a lot of different genres are all mixed into one, but everyone will have a separate appreciation for it.
Absolutely. Abs-
Beautiful. Nice. Okay. What's next on your list? You just did your first, I guess two. Would this be one and two, or would this be five and four, or is it no
that,
particular order?
this is in no particular order.
Gotcha.
But I
Okay.
feel that if I had to really rank everything, it would be Norma Jean goes first, followed by my next record, which is Transit Blues by the Devil Wears Prada.
There we go.
And I discovered them in college, first year, and I was hooked by their single, Assistant to the Regional Manager.
Ah, of course, the classic.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And I remember I listened to it and I was like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Like, what is it? But I put it down and I came back to it and I realized it was actually one of the best things that I've heard in a while. It's raw. The drums are, frenetic, and I love the interplay between the two vocalists. So so I feel like this is an extension of them building off of 818. Have you heard that album?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. What'd you think of it, just out of curiosity?
I think the lead up to that was great. They had that was the one with Martyrs on there, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Martyrs is probably one of my favorite songs by The Devil Wears Prada, but it was kind of odd where it just went from did it go from 818 to that EP, the Space EP or Spaceman EP? I forgot
Oh,
what came first.
yeah. No, no, no. I think it was actually. Let me just look that up right quick because I actually have all of this right open in front of me. I feel like it was 818, and then it was the space EP because yep, because 818 was released in 13, and Space EP came out when I was listening to it when I was in California.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Transit Blues is a concept record, and that is made evident through the multiple, like, firstly, the constant references to travel and the lifestyle that it has on the band, and lifestyle and how it affects the band members involved. Track 3, for example, Worldwide, as in it, like, Mike Karaneka sat down with the guys from Rock Sound, and they talked about this, how Worldwide was this pop song, was like their most, quote unquote pop song that they made while walking through the streets of Shibuya. And he and the keyboardist John Gehring were drunk as a skunk, and John was apparently singing the lyrics just as a joke while they were, stumbling around.
Hmm.
Yeah, and Mike had a joke that they would record it, and a couple years later, it happened. Worldwide is about how almost, a sort of disappointment with staying, so with staying in stasis in the United States. Sitting down and very much remaining. It feels that they're declaring a prolonged need to travel. The drum work on this record is entirely take everything you remember about The Devil Wears Prada and throw it out the fucking window. That's my second point. But yeah, I'll get back to that in a minute. So you have Worldwide, you have Flyover States, which is honestly my favorite track of all time by them. It's where they start to rework song structure, and where they discuss how a sort of a call to relationships across the world. It's fairly blatant in its lyrics, with the opening up with across land, across sea, we can't count the miles, the days, the months, the years. And then finally pulling into Home for Grave Part 2. This is where I also mentioned that this was not only an extension of 818, but also, like, both thematically and musically, in that it sort of prolongs it sort of enters this almost Silent Planet vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about spoken word.
Yep.
We're talking about, ambient instrumentals over very, I wouldn't say overtly heavy. They weren't really trying to be as insanely crushing as they were in their first two albums. Over this narrative, as our protagonist dies in a plane crash, and his wife is across the United States, only just hearing about this and discussing the futility of life.
Seems pretty deep.
Right? And then to close out the album, you have Transit Blues, the title track of the album, which is this blitzingly fast this extremely fast song about how the lead singer discusses his decaying mental condition. Being in a band, living a very hectic lifestyle, consistently traveling, from one corner of the world to the next, right? Living on a van.
Exactly.
It takes a toll on the mind, and it takes a toll on the body. And the lead singer, as he discusses before, suffers from, anxiety, and he suffers from this almost depression, and and Transit Blues to me is not only sort of a call for help from him, but also a bookmark to the end of the album, where he cries out the last line, "You can't feel the transit blues without losing something you thought was true."
Jesus.
Yeah, this album's really depressing, actually. Like, It's got themes. It's got The Sound and the Fury from Faulkner. It's got Lolita by Nabokov. It's gotten so many. It's drawn in so many different literary influences. It's a very deep, dark record in the sense that it's very sad, and it doesn't. While it certainly isn't nearly as politically angry as, say, Architects, or as, you know, explorative of, relationships such as Norma Jean's Polar Similar, it's still standout in its own right that it addresses the nature of the task that these these gentlemen, these musicians, have. I actually met them live when they stopped off in Richmond
Hmm.
in February. It was their first. It was actually their first show here in Virginia, 2016. And holy fucking shit, they put on such a fantastically great show. And I actually ended up getting dragged to the floor of the mosh pit. Almost got curb stomped.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, luckily for me, some dude just dragged me right out at the last minute, right before the boot came down on me. But dude, holy crap, it was just such a great show. And I met the band members afterwards, and honestly, after having met Mike Kranica and having just had a conversation with him for the short time that I did, and hearing this record really hit with me, because this album is an exploration lyrically of his psyche and its slow deterioration.
So, would you call this album Mike's cry for help?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, because every band, I think, is going to break up, right?
Of course.
Right. But more to the point, it's this is actually, and this is from a conversation that Anthony Green had about Circus Survive as they released Dissensus in 2014. You can only control The only thing you control is the condition that you are in, and that the family is in, the band is in, when you do end that relationship. This is The Devil Wears Prada, having lost almost half of its members. Actually, yeah, half of its original members are gone now.
Jeez.
Chris Bainey, Chris Ruby, James Bainey, and now Daniel Williams are no longer in the band. They've all been replaced by Kyle Cypress, uh, John Gearing, and now Giuseppe Capolupo, fantastic drummer. This is very much the part this is the part where Mike Kranica, after so many years of doing this, is now sort of putting out there that he is not that he cannot that he is not able to sustain a hectic style of music and a hectic lifestyle that comes with it.
Okay. So this could be nearing the end of The Devil Wears Prada, or at least just in Mike's mind.
I think so. And I honestly believe that when it is time for him and or Jeremy DePoyster, the two major vocalists of this group, to either step down or step away, they will step away, because I feel as if Transit Blues and 818 are the two defining albums of their career.
Wow. It'll be interesting to see what happens within the next year and right before they start pre-production for their next album, and to see what kind of path the entire band's on, because they just wrapped up a tour with Memphis May Fire and Silverstein, and
That's right.
that tour lasted quite a while, and then it went over to Europe, so they really had no break whatsoever.
That's right, because you can imagine what kind of toll it could take on you. Like, just not even from the Devil Wears Prada standpoint, just being in a band and just having to cross the country and then right across the sea without so much as a buy your leave.
Yeah.
Like, you can imagine, you'd be burned the hell out, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Nonetheless, the instrumentation on this album has undergone a massive reconstruction. Gone are the drop D chugs, chug, chug, chugs,
Hmm.
and the characteristic death growls that usually belie said chugs. They're working with different rhythms, and they even bring in they even bring in a guest vocaling on Detroit tapes, and through the use of their synthesizers, they've managed to construct an ambience in conjunction with a much more improved sense of groove on the drum kit that allows them to almost completely reinvent song structure in the context of what the Devil Wears Prada has been able to do.
Damn.
This is a complex record, I believe, and this is also a very fulfilling record. And and it's not nearly as, say, conceptually dense as, again, any of the albums I've mentioned before,
Hmm.
but it is a massive improvement over, again, anything released by Prada in the past 10 years. And I honestly hope that they can maintain this lineup, that they can maintain the cohesion that they've accomplished in this album, and when they make their next LP.
If they make their next LP.
If they do, that's a big if, and no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, except for the band, and even they don't even know.
Jesus, isn't
Yeah.
that the truth?
All right, so we have 2 albums left.
That's right. And Gavin Dance's Mothership.
All right, let's get
Was
into this one.
obviously there was a lot of hype surrounding this, right? This is Tillian Pearson's third album with the band. Tillian Pearson is actually the longest running vocalist with DGD.
That's insane.
Yeah, just think about that for a second, because remember Johnny Craig, he dropped Wizzy Row, whatever I say is Royal Ocean. He dropped DBM1. He left. Then they made, I want to say that Happiness or Death Star came next.
I'm not too sure, but those were both Kurt's albums.
Right. Because Kurt joined the band, then Kurt left and was replaced by Johnny, and then and then oh man, and then yeah, so those two albums happened, followed by Downtown Battle Mountain 2,
Yep.
and then Johnny left the band for good, and then Tillian Pearson from Tides of Men took the helm and wrote 3 albums.
Yep. And the funny part is, like, I know exactly what the other album you're going to talk about is. He was supposed to be the vocalist of that band we were going to mention next.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and that sort of leads, and that's going to, and we're going to talk about why I think that Tillian Pearson is one of the hardest working men in post-hardcore, having had his own electropop side project, having had the rhythm guitar and founding member of Tides of Man, if I'm getting that right.
Yep.
Yeah, and in addition to recording vocalings for Emarosa, I want to say that was, yeah, he had written Mamba with them. This was after Johnny Craig had left, and this was before Bradley Scott Walden took their helm. But yeah, Mr. Pearson crosses into so many different genres. He's got his thumb in so many pies, and he's a very sought after guest vocalist on many bands in this similar genre of
Yeah.
experimental rock that he's got going on.
Plus, he has probably the most unique voice you'll hear in not only metalcore, but even, like, I'd say ever.
You can hear those couple notes that he sings, and you're like, "Yep, that's Tillian."
Yeah.
Nobody, yeah, and I think that's what brings Mothership such a distinction. And let's talk about Young Robot. Have you already heard the song?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me what you get when you listen to that song.
What do I get?
Like what kind of feeling, like what do you hear about how, say, what do you feel about the jazzy, outro, like near the end of the song? How do you feel about how his voice just makes the entire song just that much more danceable?
it's it's there's a lot of pop elements. Plus, he's also a crooner. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, like the entire band mixed in so many great things. Even going from Chucky versus the Giant Tortoise into Young Robot, you're like, wait, this is the same album, let alone the same band.
Right?
Yeah,
They go from being they go in and out on this album, I feel, and they transition back and forth through so many different states. There's almost this jazzy Young Robot feel to like a to the most clear cut standard. This is post hardcore Deception,
yeah,
right? And then this almost this very pop rock Inspire the Liars, to this face shredding Petting Zoo Justice. Dude, what the fuck was that song? That song's so good, so it gets up in your face, and it's just
it's funny because John Mess, the unclean vocalist, just comes out of nowhere with the band, and he just repeats that one line over and over again right before Tillian jumps in, and it's just like, wait, what? And this is coming right after Betrayed by the Game, which could be a radio hit.
it most definitely could be. And yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because you have these songs that shift in between being easily mainstream pop, and just this lovely standard rock, to all of a sudden grooving, grinding John Mess hardcore, almost bringing in Secret Band in its entirety, featuring Tillian Pearson. Like that's those are the two phases. They go from Dance Gavin Dance to Secret Band on the same album.
Yep.
Yeah, and while I feel like there are a couple of songs that could have been executed differently. For example, I feel like Philosopher King on that album was by far it's the weakest DGD song. I feel in their entire catalog. Just not for any other reason except that it's just it. I don't get the same feeling of cohesion that I get on any other song on that record.
Yeah, and the funniest part is the weakest DGD track could be the strongest of almost any other band.
Most definitely, and that should speak to you about the musicianship that they are bringing on this record. Matt Mingus's drumming is, again, I mentioned before that when you hear specific drummers, when you hear their beats, it's very flavorful, it's very distinct. That's Matt Mingus. Somebody actually took a picture of General Grievous with all four of his lightsabers extended, and captioned it "Actual shot of Matt Mingus drumming." That's accurate. That's accurate in this case because he has such a good command of groove and timing and the genre and the drums that go into post-hard and metal, at least, especially over the last two records and on their EPs, which was released. I want to say it was actually released 2 years ago. The Secret Band EP, self-titled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good shit, man. The bass is not necessarily as visible on this one as it was in Instant Gratification, but it still works with the guitars and the drums to produce this solid, very solid instrumental section. John Mess works very well with them, and that's not just because of his continuous work with Secret Band. That's because I think that the way that they have it set up is that it's still while it's kind of mainstream, it's still very screamable for Mess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as forced as for example the newest Issues album. It seemed like if it was without the screamer, I think it would have been like probably a top rock album of the year, if not pop.
Ooh, definitely. Yeah, I couldn't get into the new Issues album, and that was disappointing for me because I absolutely loved the first album.
Yep.
Oh man, the Langdon House is actually probably one of my favorites of 2014.
Yeah, even the one song that got me into him, I think was the worst of them, and it was just like a beautiful song, and like everything worked out together. And then this one, it seemed like they're screaming. I'm sorry, keep fucking forgetting names here, but it went the more like shouting part, like Dave Stevens of We Came as Romans and Trevor Wentworth of Our Last Night. They're trying to shift more into like the hard rock scene, which I totally get, but he doesn't really have it.
Yeah, and it's very much how you do it that matters. It's every band is going to change their sound, but it's all dependent on the way that you do it.
Yeah, but
In some cases, in the cases of bands like Under Oath, their first response is to become less accessible, and we see and as a result of that, you get disambiguation. In the case of Mice and Men, however, they chose to again, completely drop out almost entirely what made them a metalcore band and
yeah.
what made them so fantastically hard hitting in the first place. And honestly, it's for that reason that Cold World was a complete flop for me.
It definitely was a flop to a lot of people because a lot of people were thinking, okay, what of Mice and Men are we going to get? Are we going to get like a second Sebring of Mice and Men, or are we going to get like a newer hard rock sound? And we got like a newer hard rock sound, but it wasn't like their last album.
Because I feel like when they were doing their last album, I feel like of Mice and Men were very much about the sound that they were on tour with. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean they were.
Linkin Park.
Yeah, there we go. I knew they were on their. They opened up for I think Linkin Park and Rise Against on one tour for a couple of dates until Chester broke something else because that's what Linkin Park does.
That's what Linkin Park actually absolutely does. And yeah, but in the case of Mice and Men, they're not breaking limbs, they're breaking Austin Carlisle's heart, and I really hope he actually recovers because I really hope he doesn't hurt himself. I just don't want that to happen to him, man. That would be terrible.
Yeah, cool little story though. Like right before we get back into things,
Yep.
I work for a law school up here in New Jersey, and my boss goes to a random personal trainer every I think like Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that. And for the longest time, Austin Carlisle would work out with her and the trainer.
Holy shit.
Yeah, she told me one day she's like, yeah, so I was working out with this one rock guy. I'm pretty sure you would know him, and he was in some band, something about mice. I think I was like of Mice and Men. She's like, yeah, that's it. I was working out with the lead singer. I was like, Austin Carlisle. It's like, yeah, he's a small, frail little guy. I'm like, yeah, I can definitely see that.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, yeah. The problem with Marfan syndrome is how it's the body is very much weakened,
Yeah.
and yeah, and everything is out of proportion, and oh man, and it's that, and in a lifestyle that already is difficult for you, the person involved with that lifestyle, to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It is so much more difficult for Mr. Carlisle to do so.
Of course. But I mean, I did see them at Rock Allegiance in Philly last September, and they sounded great. Austin was in great shape, and then of course he took a turn for the worse. So
Yeah,
hoping for a positive 2017, and hopefully he gets back to normal.
hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully. Oh man.
Yeah.
So, and that actually brings me to my next point. What can DGD do next? Because this is their eighth album, right, John?
Seventh, I believe.
Because I thought that was Instant Gratification.
Hold on. That's why we have Wikipedia.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, Mothership is seventh if you don't count the EP.
Okay. So we have to. So we're count. So we don't count the EP. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. So I feel like there's only so much you can do in a genre such as this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like Gavin Dance has always operated on a very niche area of music that isn't necessarily metalcore, that isn't necessarily hardcore. It's very much Red Hot Chili Peppers meets shit, Law Dispute, and and I feel like there's only so much you can do before either completely abandoning your identity completely,
Hmm.
or or somehow continue or continuing to produce records that still sound like that, but that still sound like you, but not necessarily as, you know, fit, punchy as, say, Downtown Battle Mountain 2
Yeah.
or Instant Gratification, because God knows those two albums were fantastic. Also, my favorite two, also like Mothership, DBM2, and Instant Gratification are my top three albums ever released by DGE.
Yeah, I hear you there. And they're still one of the only bands where you could listen to Downtown Battle Mountain, the original, and you could listen to Mothership, and you could be like, this is the same band.
Absolutely. While not necessarily song to song, in the in in the context of Mothership, DGD still have their musical identity well fully intact, and
Yes.
it's so refreshing because you see all sorts of bands doing that as time goes on. A specific example to lend itself is We Came as Romans. Remember when they started out, they were this, blistering, brand of synth and Dave Stevens' screams and Eric Choi's very distinctive drums, though not necessarily you know mind blowing by any means. You could listen to it and say that's We Came as Romans.
Yep.
But as time went on, I felt as if that same drumming didn't necessarily make itself as known, especially during their last record. And then he left the band.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, it's very much the concern is how much you can do with your craft before you either repeat yourself completely or lose that trademark.
Yeah. But the best part about Dance Gavin Dance is they could get even more crazy and more wild, and they could still sound like the same band. So I think the sky's the limit with these guys. I really don't think they haven't put out an identical record yet. And this being their seventh studio album, like each record that you listen to, I mean, granted, whoever the fuck the vocalist is, there's a difference in the musicianship, but there's also a lot of similarities within the musicianship. So it's similar and different all at the same time.
And that's very hard to accomplish. Now
Oh, very, yeah.
you're actually completely correct. Um, just for example, like Downtown Battle Mountain 1 compared to Downtown Battle Mountain 2. Holy shit. Like while those are, conceptually, they're conceptually in order, they're two very different styles.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to see that and to feel that and to know that and that's what lends Dance Gavin Dance's status to this top five list, is that they've put out another record that feels like a pop record, but at the same time it's not a pop record. It's still very much a Dance Gavin Dance record, and it's fucking amazing.
I think that's a great way to end it. So now it comes to the last one, which I actually forgot was released this year. I mean, I thought this was released last year, and I had to double check it when you sent it to me, and it came out in May.
Yeah. Honestly, this was the album that I had been waiting for the most, and that I actually and that I was probably watching with the most anticipation because I knew this band, and this one is one very near and dear to me. Saosin, releasing their third album, Along the Shadow, marking the debut of their original vocalist, Anthony Green from Circa Survive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the lead. Let's start with the lead single, "The Silver String." That is the first song I listened to it, and I saw it was a Saosin song, and I thought and I clicked on it. I had to check myself to ask if it was still the same band, John. The
There's a
cover yeah,
I
the
was about to say,
cover.
there's a whole new life that went into the first single that came in. Like you saw what Cove put out with the band, and you thought they were going in one direction, and you saw the stuff that Anthony originally put out, the EPs and whatever else, and then this single came out, and you're like, Mother of God, they just evolved.
Yeah, I grew up. Saosin was actually one of the first bands that I listened to as a kid. So their album, the self-titled, was actually one of the first albums that my brothers and I actually purchased. Among Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, Maroon Five's Songs About Jane, and Coldplay's X and Y.
All great albums.
Oh yeah, we were all very grown on a diverse music taste. So Seosin, like I listened to the first album, I loved it. I listened to the second album, I was kind of like, it's not,
Yeah, it's just not good.
it's not terrible, but it's not as remarkable as say, it doesn't have a Voices or it doesn't have a Bury Your Head, both iconic songs from self-titled.
Which I was kind of surprised that Bury Your Head didn't make a third appearance into the Saosin album.
Yeah, but that's okay because this album's fucking and something else entirely. I hear the Silver String and I immediately hear that this is an entirely new band. It's the same lineup, minus Justin Chakosky, who's now playing guitar in The Used,
Correct. Yep.
to replace Quinn Allman, but it's oh my god. All right, so let's all right. Firstly, the guitars on this album scream to me nostalgia. If you hear any alt rock album, you think, okay, cool, that's all right. You hear Seosin's, and it's a very specific brand of guitar, and then you hear Anthony Green's vocals, and he can try, and he has a very. You've heard. How do you feel about Circus Survive, John?
I used to really despise them, and then it grew on me. I think On Letting Go is one of my favorite albums by them, and then they progressed and they progressed and they progressed. I'm not too sure exactly where they're going to go next, but I think I would be a fan of it.
Recording in 2017 with Will Yip. So,
Who also produced this album.
that's right. So yeah, let's. So it kind of feels like an extension of Circus Survive. At least that's what the first song would give you. Okay, it kind of feels like, Circus Survive, on Letting Go, but a little bit more aggressive. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
But then the second song kicks in, Ideology is Theft. And again, John, I have to ask myself again, is this the same band? Because this is Anthony Green screaming his lungs out. These are grinding breakdowns. These are drums that, are almost out of control. And then it shifts back into this, into this soothing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, following along before it again completely turns around on you. And I like that, and that's one of the biggest draws that pulled me into this record is that it feels like it's familiar, and then what happens is it completely switches around on you. But it's again Seosin, and it's celebrate, and the tracks all feel, when you listen to the drumming that, say, Alex Rodriguez puts onto the record, it's very much a celebration of everything from 7 Years and self-titled, and a little bit of the alt rock tendency that In Search of Solid Ground gave. But it's very much an instant gratification record for Seosin in that it takes that familiarity and it extends it, and it runs with it, and the results are more than promising enough to say that I actually wish that Seosin would release another album following this, because the combination of vocals, the combination of rhythms, and the melody dropped over all of this to make it what it is honestly one of the best post-hardcore records of 2016.
So now, did they announce that this is their only album with Anthony, or because Anthony does about 5,000 different projects, you never know where the hell he's at.
Because he's currently recording with Circus Survive. He just finished touring for Pixie Queen with his solo album, and he somehow does this, and he also has time to sit down and still be a father,
To
you know,
4 kids.
to 4 kids and a husband, and also still on the road of recovery from a heroin addiction. So I honestly don't know, but and again, it's neither does the band. It seems because everything in everything in that album screams to me as if it could be extended, it could be done, and it could be done better. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I understand completely.
While it's one of the most memorable albums of 2016, and also one of the most recent, I have a 2016 playlist made for me by Spotify, and a large part of that is all of the songs from Along the Shadow, because I've been playing them because they receive the most play from me as
Non-stop.
nonstop. Oh my god, running, studying, driving. Songs like "Drinking from the Fountain," which blend this perfect, mix of what seems to be Anthony's unbridled aggression over a bridge, where he's while the drums wail in the background, to this almost as if he's crooning in the background while the backing vocalist actually handles most of the singing. It switches off, and it's consistent, and it's complex, and it's more to the point. It's out of all of the albums that we've discussed, it's the most accessible. Does that make any? It's the most ready to receive anybody from any genre.
Yeah, it's not tied down to a metalcore genre. It's not tied down to alternative or a post rock. I mean,
Perhaps
yeah, it's basically anyone who likes music can listen to this and appreciate it. Like there's really no real like screaming like compared to like Architects or John
oh,
Mess and Kevin Dance, but it's more of everyone can appreciate what's going on in this album.
it's very much a Saosin album, and that's what and yes, and that exactly is what gave Saosin and their self-titled that same draw, is that everybody can appreciate at least one song off the album, whether it's Second Guesses, which feels like a Finding Home 2.0, whether it's the Stutter Says a Lot, which is what feels like the most beautiful love letter to actually fans of the band. If this is true, I'd do it all over again. It's it's more to the point. It's beautiful, and it doesn't try to get grungy. It doesn't try to get too grungy or ugly. It doesn't weigh itself over any superbly political differences. It doesn't necessarily talk about you know it doesn't talk about much, but it still says a lot. To put it one way.
I get it. It says a lot, and it says a little in a lot, and a lot in a little, all at the same time.
In a very roundabout sense, yeah. The lyrics are though it's Anthony Green at the first by the end of the first song, not because of any other reason except the lyric style, except the delivery and the I have to draw your attention to the song "Control and the Urge to Pray," and the way that his lines are delivered, the way that the rhythm sections work, and the way that the melody works in time with him. Listening to that, you hear Saosin at its finest. You hear the culmination of about 10 years of what they've been building from ever since Anthony left the band following the release of his debut EP with them.
Yep.
The album the album you could easily subtract self-titled and In Search of Solid Ground and put that album in and put Along the Shadow as their debut album, and it would function just as well. Because that's what this feels like, John. It very much feels like Saosin for the first time.
It feels like the very first time.
What's that from?
Boston? Feels like the first time.
Uh, I,
Feels like the very first time.
I haven't heard much Boston except for More Than a Feeling. That's one of my favorites from
Hold
them.
on, is that Boston or Foreigner? Hold on. Feels like the first time. Okay. Foreigner. Okay.
Okay, yeah. I haven't heard any Foreigner either. Actually, I'm pretty misinformed. But over the
Yeah.
course of but over the course of this winter break, I'm making it my point to listen to the entirety of The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall by Pink Floyd. Just back to back.
It is interesting, those two albums. Um, if I were you, I would watch the movie too. Watch the movie The Wall.
All right, all right, all
Yeah,
right.
it's completely fucked. I'm not gonna lie to you there. It's out there,
That's
but
not You're not the first person to tell me that, honestly.
it is like life changing in a way.
Okay, all right, yeah. Um,
And also the Dark Side of the Rainbow, the Wizard of Oz mashup thing, is a myth. I don't care what anyone says; it does not sync up.
so if I were to, so if I just put both records on at the same time, it wouldn't actually just it
Well,
wouldn't actually sound.
I think someone did it on YouTube, where they actually synced up at a certain point, Dark Side of the Moon with the Wizard of Oz, like where it's supposed to be at, and like some things are like coincidence of like what's happening in there, but other things are like, all right, this doesn't work out at all. So sorry to burst your bubble, people, but it does not make sense.
Ah, that's a shame. I was looking forward to doing that.
I mean, you
Well,
can do that and maybe gather your own conclusion from it, but from my take, it just doesn't. It didn't go well for me.
the satire alternative scene magazine, the hardtimes.net. Are you
Yeah,
familiar?
of course.
They actually wrote the most brilliant. They wrote the most brilliant piece on a kid who decided that after listening to Pink Floyd, he spent the entirety of his college career just syncing up everything,
Uh,
and then he drops out of school. That's the entire point of the article is that he just drops out of school because he just spends way too much fucking time trying to synchronize Pink Floyd music.
that whole website is hilarious. I mean, for people that don't know, it's the music version of The Onion, so it's basically all fake news stories and whatnot. And I read one today where it was band receives merchandise shipment already out of medium sizes.
Yes, that was yeah. I was reading that yesterday, and I think the biggest draw for me, and what I love about it is that it's just a little bit too real for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Like obvious, like the Onion is already like it's the Onion is already hits home pretty hard for me. But as somebody who's who's trying to entrench himself in the alternative scene, reading things like a stoner band trying to write music in 420 time signature, that's like the problem is that I know people who do shit like that.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. But to summarize everything, to briefly summarize what I've put forth here in
Yep.
this past hour with you, is that 2016 has been a wonderful year for us, despite having killed off most of the people that of familiar faces and celebrities that we know and love. Um, it has been a great year for music, and architects with their politically relevant, you know, uh, narrative that they've been building since they started out have capped off with All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us. And that was a riveting album for me because of how accurate it was in the context of the US election cycle. And Norma Jean and Polar Similar, while constructing an album that's maliciously heavy and a mixture of so many of the extreme metal genres that I love have made it so that any metal fan can get into it while also making it lyrically intelligent and musically tight. The Devil Wears Prada have continued almost reinventing themselves from the start of 818 by constructing an album that isn't tied down to specifically breakdown riddled metalcore. More to the more to the point, they've moved in the direction of almost an experimental sound that is sure to bring them success, I believe, if they were to continue with it on another LP. I honestly hope they last long, and I can say that they've been one of the most formative bands for me in developing my love of the genre. Dance Gavin Dance is also an extremely relevant band for me, and Mothership was a culmination, I feel, of the pop rock tendencies mixed with, you know, like their acceptance speech song "Carve." Do you remember that song, "Carve"?
Not off the top of my head.
Absolutely nasty breakdowns. John Mess, screaming, while again Tillian just drops these, these high falsettos over being terribly wasted and coming to pieces while Matt Mingus, shreds the drums apart. And this album brings out the best of Matt Mingus's machine gun like tendencies as well as his jazz and pop sensibilities. And Will Swan has also improved his guitar work considerably. John sounds so much more raw, and this album as a whole feels so much more cohesive. And lastly, Saosin's Along the Shadow is what feels like a direct continuation of 7 years, as well as incorporating the elements that made their self-titled so fantastic and what lent In Search of Solid Ground its still positive tendencies. And while no one can be certain to say the future of, bands like Saosin and the Devil Wears Prada and, God forbid, Dance Gavin Dance, if anything, despite the fact that, no one knows, I can only hope that they continue. And I honestly hope that they can put out an album that tops any of the ones that I've mentioned so far because, Jesus, music, music is such a beautiful thing, and the way that these guys, all of these bands have composed it, they've hit the mark.
Yep, I agree with you there.
Yes, sir.
Wow. All right. So we just got your top 5 albums of the year. So if you like what you're hearing from Kevin, he's going to be coming out with a lot more interviews, hopefully in 2017. He already has 2 that he sent over to me, which will be up on YouTube hopefully soon. We're still trying to put up all of our episodes up there. So what kind of screwed everything up is we have to re-upload everything because YouTube decided to go and say, all right, we're taking everything down for copyrights because we would include the music in there. So we just had to re-upload every single episode, but just the interview part, and that's just a pain in the ass.
I'm so sorry. That's honestly the worst.
Yeah. So we got that. Hopefully in 2017 we learn our lesson. And hopefully in 2017 we could start doing video podcasts, maybe some live streaming stuff. You never know.
Yeah, and honestly, with the new year, there's all sorts of new possibilities.
Absolutely. I mean, put it this way: if you told me that, this time last year that I would accomplish all of this, what just happened this year, like interviewing a shit ton of my favorite bands and actually doing 80-something episodes of this thing, I'd look at you like you were fucking nuts. But we did it, so.
If you told me that I would be that this would be something that I could do, John, if you told me sometime last year, again, that I would be in a way on any sort of media platform being able to use my voice to speak about these sort of things
Yeah.
and even get close to this shit, I would have told you again, you're also pretty fucking crazy. But I love how, yeah, I love how everything has worked out, and I would love for the opportunity to keep doing more. Uh, I can't wait for the new A Lot Like Birds album. I can't wait for new Circa. I can't wait for new music as a whole.
Yep. But it's going to be tough to top this year, as you said before. This
That's
has been a
right.
great year.
That's right. But like I said before, anything is possible in 2017, man.
Absolutely. I think this will be a great time to end things. Kevin, do you have any plugs? Where can people find you at?
Okay, so you can actually find me on my Twitter at PERERA.K. And you can find me on Instagram. And you can find me on Twitter at GRNDTHFTACDMIA. That's Grand Theft Academia on Twitter.
Okay.
And yeah, hit me up over Facebook, and I'll be around.
All right. Kevin Perera, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much, John.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Later.